So that is all available on our website. The latest one, really talks about how the distributors were really resilient in 2020 in spite of COVID and really performed quite well and strongly. So keep an eye on those. Those are short columns. We also put out a new study there. You see the photo with Frank on it, which is a column that he published that really talks about the study around fraud. It's a fraud report, which is really geared more towards the reseller audience and how to help them be aware and look out for ways in which hacking has really hacking incidents have risen a little bit over the last year. Not necessarily related to COVID, but making the resellers very vulnerable to fraudulent POs, and payment redirections, et cetera. So it is a guidebook of sorts to advise resellers how to keep themselves safe and how to train their staff to keep a lookout. And also the front line, the role that distributors are playing and being the front line and really helping prevent some of those activities from taking place within their own systems as well. And last but not least, and I don't know if anyone from Exertis is on the call, but we would like to give you guys a sneak peek. Okay. Hello. So this is an announcement that's going to go out next week. We're very happy to announce that Exertis is going to join the GTDC, effective really pretty much immediately. Tim Griffin and Clive Fitzharris will be joining our GTDC Board of Directors. So we're very happy to announce that. But with that, I think that's it. I think we can go to the next slide. I think as Peter indicated, and Adam, this
You were muted.
You're on mute.
Kavita, you got muted.
Oh, I got muted. Okay, sorry about that, guys. So the distribution panel that we're going to have here, we want to first of all thank everyone for participating. It will be chaired by Bob Snyder from Channel Media, and the panelists are going to be Alessandro Cattani from Esprinet, Klaus, Schichterle, and I'm sorry, I practiced this and I might probably, but Schichterle from
very close, very close.
I will try it. I'll try it more later. My apologies.
Okay.
Jesper Trolle from Exclusive and Jacek Murawski from Ingram Micro. So with no further ado, I think we'll go ahead and turn it over to Adam.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kavita. So last time we actually talked about having a panel. And so it's really nice that today we're going to do that, because it means that I'm going to be a little bit less long, and it's going to be a little bit less data and a little bit more exchange led by Bob. And I think that should be really interesting to hear what people have to say about the channel. Like last time, we're going to have a few questions along the way. So if you could lift your smartphone up with your QR reader to pick up that QR code, or you can go into slido.com and put in hashtag GTDC 2021, then you'll be able to take part in the questions that we're going to ask. And the questions really just to kind of get everybody thinking about some of the issues that we're going to be talking about in the presentation. So I'm going to have a look at Q1 to date up to week 9. We'll talk about Q2, and then we move into the panel discussion. So let's just start off to get us all going. What word would you use to describe the beginning of 2021? So perhaps if you can get your Slido going, that would be really good. Oh, very good. Yeah. Yeah, strong. And Bob, do comment if you want to as you're coming along and you see these words pop up on the screen.
I love the big hopeful up there. That's
yeah, it's funny, isn't
promising.
It?
Yeah.
Actually, the word that I thought of for me, definitely. Okay, give it just about 5 seconds more. Promising, strong, hopeful. Yeah. Okay, so Bob is going to come back to these when he actually has his panel discussion. Okay, So let's just move on. So it is promising, strong and hopeful. And I just thought I'd start off today with a couple of promising and hopeful thoughts about one area, particularly flagged up by Frank in his article about cybersecurity. So we had this extraordinary event in a few weeks ago of the whole of the Department of Social Security in Spain, stopping 700 offices being closed, the internet being shut down. And the thing that really struck me was that the computer application and systems average age of about 30 years. So here's something hopeful: cyber attacks leading to undermine public sector systems, which are aging and creaking and need updating. Now, obviously, there's lots of people trying to attack this business, but I'm sure it's a great opportunity for the channel. The second comes from our data. So we did a review of the cybersecurity going through the channel, and we see that endpoint security is the fastest growing area of cybersecurity prevention. And this is really being driven on the back of all these notebooks that are sitting in people's homes, and the CIOs saying, hey, we've really got to get control of this. So we also saw at the end of December a huge increase in terms of sales, license upgrades, crosses and extensions after the FireEye hacking which took place. So definitely hopeful for us, and software is going to be one of those areas that's going to really grow, we think, in 2021, and obviously has been growing all the way along, and the distribution has an important role to play in it. Every time when we come together, I've been showing you this 13-week index showing how the channel is doing country by country. The black squares are showing the weeks which are covered for the first 9 weeks of 2021 and the first 9 weeks of 2020. What you can see is that we're riding on the crest of a wave that as you look at all of the countries, they're pretty much above where they were a year ago. And we know that we're running at the moment, and I'm going to show it to you now, at above 10% growth. So that is really good. And you can see with little microscopes, this is the 6th time, as I say, that we've been doing this with the GTDC to give you an update about what's going on in the market. And if you look at the 9-week growth of Q1, you can see that it's 11.6%, which is very, very healthy growth. It's accelerating from previous quarters. We've seen it go 5, 8, 10.5, and now 11.6%. Very much driven, as we know, by volume, with value still in negative territory. And I thought I'd just share with you what has happened in terms of the share of volume and value. So in fact, the volume has actually taken 5% share of the total of all sales through distribution. And in fact, if you look at it, it really comes down to mobile computing, which has gone from 18 to 22% of all that goes through the channel. So that's really what we're seeing. Now, what's interesting is that there is a mix by country of different ways in which you combine the business of volume and value. So if you look here, this is country by country, showing the percentage of volume and value. On the left-hand side, the highest volume percentage countries. And then this is looking at the comparing February 21 to and January, February 21 to the previous year. So what you can see here is that Poland is the biggest. I'm going right the way down to Austria, which is the smallest. And the percentages range from 83 down to 59%. Now, what you might think is that the growth rates would be linked to those with the highest volumes. And that's what we have seen. But in fact, what we see in this beginning of the year is that the highest growth rates here, which are marked on the line which I've just put up there, They're quite randomly distributed across the countries. And what does that mean? It really means that the volume is driving so much growth that it's actually bringing the countries into profitability and into growth. The only exception is really France. If you look at it, you can see it's at 0% growth so far. That is very much a value country, and it has not had the volume growth that other countries have had, which would have taken it into this positive territory. And we do see that countries like Poland, Italy, and Spain, which have this very high volume and were very much driving forward in 2020, are continuing in 2021. And that's a little bit of catch up there between Southern Europe and Northern Europe. So let's have a look and see what's actually happened in the channel. So what we see in the channel is that as smaller, medium-sized resellers are staying very much the same as they were in Q4. There's a bit of a bounce back in corporate resellers. So I had a look to see what that bounce back was all about. And in fact, that bounce back is, guess what? It's all about mobile computing. So if you look at some of the value areas for the corporate resellers, they've not been performing so well. But in this period, there's been an 86% growth in mobile computing. So that's really where the strength has been. But we see a decline in retail chain compared to Q4, which is not surprising when you think that it was Q4 Black Friday and all of those consumer-driven products. What is interesting is to see the inexorable rise of e-tailer consumer, which has grown even faster in Q1 than it was growing in Q4. Although when you look at the right-hand side, it still remains a reasonably small percentage of the total. So we gave guidance of between 6 and 12%, and we saw that we're at 11.6%. And here we see how it actually breaks up volume and value. And here you can see this very large growth, the 57% growth in mobile computing. We never thought it would be quite as high as that. Desktop down 23%. You can see monitors up significantly, computing accessories, AV systems, all these categories which we're used to seeing growing. And then when you look at the decreases, you're looking at a big decrease there in the infrastructure and security and in software and licenses and all those areas, although there have been some bright spots and some signs of growth recently and of stabilization really of the value business. We've seen that in the last few weeks. It's just kind of not quite taking off. We're waiting for a bit of a boost at the end of March. So for us, looking forward to the end of the quarter, what we see is, so growth to date, 11.6%. If we take into account the fact there's going to be always one fewer day in 2021 than in 2020 in this quarter, because last year was a leap year, then that will naturally, you'll lose 300 million or 344 million euros of revenue year on year. But we do expect a bit of a boost at the year end with some quarter end value sales. So we're reckoning that the quarter will come out at around about 11%, between 11 and 12%. Which is interesting compared to what everybody said when we asked you that question back in January. So 25% of you were spot on saying 10% plus. I reckon that you're going to be the ones who are going to be right. The majority were in the 5 to 10%. We were in the kind of thinking that the central case was in the 5 to 10% mark. So now we're just to talk about the Q2 outlook. And before we do the Q2 outlook, I'm going to ask you if that's okay to do a little bit of work to help us to get the discussion going with Bob. So the first question is, when do you expect the value business to grow again overall in Europe? Q2, Q3, Q4, or 2022? So let's see what people think. Give you a few minutes. Okay. Okay. Right. We seem to be settling down to, let me just move my screen, 37%, 36% in Q3, definitely an H2 event, not an Q2 event, and not 2022. Okay, so let's bear that in mind for when we get onto the discussion that Bob's going to have with everybody. And the next one, what are the biggest opportunities now? So this is a word cloud, and you can put anything in there in no more than 25 characters, and be interesting to see what people think are the biggest opportunities for security. Yeah, it's public spending. Yeah, cybersecurity, security, notebooks. Good old notebooks. Yeah. Right. I think we are all looking at security. It's amazing, actually. Okay, just give you a couple more minutes. Edge. Okay, so if you got that, Bob, I can always come back and show it to you later on, Bob, when you get to sit and ask the panelists what they think. But
I've got it, thanks.
You've got it, great. Okay, so there's a strong vote there for security and cybersecurity. So here's a few thoughts from me about Q2. So first of all, volume growth continues to be driven by home working and education, notebooks, headsets, printers, webcams, monitors, microphones. The growth of the secure home environment. So we're seeing this endpoint security. I think we're going to see more of that happening in Q2. New or invigorated categories. You know, I think that as people get into the home working space, there's going to be new categories that are going to grow. So I've picked a few of them. In fact, I have a personal interest in all of them. Because since the lockdown, I put in a nice Philips Hue light bulb to help light up my room when I'm on Zoom so that it looks a bit more professional. I'm getting a green screen so that I can actually have a nice background. And I have a mono laser printer. The humble mono laser printer is actually one of the things I'm most attached to in my office because it's such a fantastic little producer of printing. I'm sorry if I'm not as ecological as some people are, but I do like to print things out. And it's quick and it's efficient. And by the way, they are selling fast. And I don't think it's just because all the inkjets have gone or whatever, but I think it's a real opportunity. There will continue to be stock shortages, and we're expecting more government spending, but the big EU investment is only going to flow through in H2. So there's the 1.8 trillion investment that we're all waiting for and is definitely going to fund stuff in the IT sector in the second half of the year. And we certainly think that value is going to grow in H2. There's some pent-up demand for the digital transformation, security, new software, services, and all those areas which have been hampered by the lockdown. So let's end off my bit by asking you to say what you think the overall channel growth was going to be in Q2. So let's see if we can get this one right. So we got, okay. So we're still in the 5 to 10%. 0 to 5, 10%. So the 10% plus is getting about the same number of votes as it did last time. And it looks like the 5 to 10% is getting the majority vote, and that is 58%. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Bob and let's hear what everyone has to say. Unless anyone has any questions. And if you do have questions, do use the chat if you want to ask any questions. So over to you, Bob.
Thanks, Adam. And of course, if you have questions for the panel, you can put them in the chat as well. The panel has been advised that I'm not going to ask each member each question in order to avoid some repetition. So I'm going to try to first address the poll questions, and if the panel members want to join in, they'll kind of announce themselves. And if I'll start it off by trying to pick one or another to volunteer. So the poll slide that we started with is, what word would you use to describe the beginning of 2021? And you saw that very big hopeful, you saw growth, strong, very strong. And then in that underlying area, you saw clearing backlog and no inventory. So success has its own problems, so to speak. I'd like to ask my panel, we have Alex, Klaus, Jesper, and Jacek. I'd like to ask, I think I'm going to start with Alex, because I'm sure you used a word to describe the beginning of 2021, Alex. And I'm wondering what word you picked out of that group.
Well, hi, everybody. Well, I put good. The here took off well, but I think later on, hopeful is probably the right word to describe this year. We are all hopeful we'll get back to normal in many senses, including having products.
And again, hopeful, you know, in the middle of a pandemic is probably a very good word to hang on to, because who knows which direction and what, you know, where we're really going in the end. But you know, do my other panel members, did you have another word or something that might be interesting that would throw more light on the difference between the strong and the hopeful? You know, Klaus, did you have something that you proposed?
I actually put in light, because I think there's a lot of positive momentum in various areas. Of course, the pandemic seems to, you know, get under control by the vaccinations happening. But from a business perspective, I think it will release and unleash, I think, a lot of potential, because of a lot of areas where we basically see that with a changing environment, there is a lot of need for cybersecurity. That's the area I'm in, obviously. But the digitalization of business will also spur a lot of investments. And I think in that sense, light was the right word for me, you know, that there's lots of opportunities ahead of us.
It puts a lot of pressure on our security friends, you know, to know that this is the area that the most growth is coming. It seems to put you under pressure as much as anything else.
No, absolutely. Double digit is the minimum.
All right. You know, given that it's the first question, I am going to ask Jesper if you have a word that you wanted to share, just to introduce the panel, and then I'll come to Jacek.
No, I think, you know, I think I agree with the words used so far. I think, you know, we all hopeful, we all see light at the end of the tunnel. So I don't think I have a lot of new words to add to that. And
Jacek, did you have?
Maybe to be a bit of a devil's advocate, I would say I have been somewhat disappointed to see the slow vaccination process in Europe, and you know, I was hoping for more. I expected the trends to turn faster. So I actually have put more of the same. When I look at our Q1, it looks very similar to Q4 or Q3, the same patterns, you know. So I think we are really hopeful to see some change, but I have not observed it yet.
I think that's a fairly astute observation. In fact, Jacek, it more of the same in terms of the, you know, we have we're enjoying some growth, and at the same time, we're all worried about what's behind the growth and how long it's going to be sustained and what happens that's beyond our parameters to control and to influence. Let's move on to the next poll question. You know, we had, when do you expect the value business to grow overall in Europe? And you know, here we had a lot of discussion about the driving forces, and some of the guesses were Q3 came out the strongest. I think that was 37%, Q4 at 30, Q2 at 21, and 14% not until next year, you know, which is understandable. So Klaus, you're in the value business, but you're specialized in security. Are there other parts of your business that are also being driven upwards?
Yeah, it's very much driven by technology trends, you know. And when you look at the whole push of the home office, that obviously has driven a lot of technology, namely endpoint, but also authentication. And then with all the incidents you're seeing now, because a lot of companies get attacked, you know, there are areas like managed detection and response or incident response, which is literally exploding right now because there's so much happening because of people having various places to work from with various devices, and everything needs to be secured. And on top, everybody wants to move into the cloud, and the cloud also needs to be secured. So there's a lot of technologies which are basically driving a lot of value projects, but this is also a little bit of a longer cycle kind of business. And but you can see basically that a lot of big corporations have been moving already into that area, and the small and medium businesses will follow pretty soon.
All right, I'm going to throw up one of the questions from the audience that just says, you know, given the fact that security is so hot, you know, is there a shortage of talent and expertise in the market, which has been reported in the past? And Klaus, have you seen that?
Yeah, one of the biggest inhibitors for growth is actually hiring people, because the expertise is very specific, and there's not an endless supply of people understanding cybersecurity. So that's actually a big inhibitor for the whole industry. And when you look at it, there's more or less a war for talents. Also from the vendor side, I mean, our vendor partners, they have it even harder to get people, you know, recruited, and that's actually inhibiting the growth for sure currently.
And Jesper, you know, certainly Infinigate has, you know, it's both feet into the value end of the business. You know, how do you find that? And are you agreeing with the Q3 forecast by the majority of the people?
So I think you meant exclusive, but I'll let Klaus speak to his business.
Sorry.
No, you know, we are obviously predominantly in security as well, and we see some of the same trends that Klaus alluding to. I think, you know, on the question from the audience, there's absolutely a skills gap. In fact, we've seen a lot of demand for our resources from partners during last year and also at the beginning of the year. Some vendors are making quite significant investments in salespeople to be ready when, you know, when the market reopens a bit. You know, I would say we think of this year as sort of a twofold year. We think the first half is probably not going to be too different than what we saw last year, and second half we expect to see some reopening particularly if the countries get the vaccine distribution. You know, we are a collective distribution industry. It feels like they could need a bit of help with distributing vaccines. But if we get that out, I think second half could give that boost that I think was one of the words used also to describe what do we think of the future. But in general, I would say, frankly, the business I think it's very segment driven. The business holding up very well, particularly in security and cyber in general.
I would have to say I would be so much more comfortable if the people on this call were in charge of distributing the vaccine than the people who are. That would really make me comfortable. And Just in terms of the value business, Alex, if you want to comment, or Jacek, otherwise I'm going to move on to the next question. Do you guys, if you want to just,
well, I
jump
think,
in.
Yeah, I think what's more common, I feel there's a connection between the shortage of products and the shortage of people. I think we were, as an industry, taken by surprise by the tremendous growth of digital adoption, and also digital adoption by the car industry, which drained the components. So all in all, we have a big fight for both components and talent in two industries in accelerating mode. And so I foresee a long, painful period of troubles ahead to get. It's good. It's good pain, I mean, because it's excess of growth opportunities, but still we are in a complex situation, and I don't foresee soon any way of fixing this problem. It will take years probably.
But it makes you kind of wish that Elon Musk had stuck to space instead of pushing the car industry, huh? I think that's
absolutely
probably part of the point here. Moving on to the biggest opportunities that are here, and we saw slides that are saying that new technologies are accounting for 17% of new technologies will rise 17%. And some of the ones mentioned were unified communications, the cybersecurity, of course, and gaming, which is hot for numerous reasons. The word green popped up. Notebooks, which of course are playing into the home working, smart lighting, and the mono laser printer. Let's not forget that for Adam. The categories that are coming. But I want to start with Jacek, if I might, on some of the opportunities that you might see.
I actually put the unified communication as an opportunity. Of course, cybersecurity, we all probably agree, but I think there's a deep social change going on with all of us being on this video, for example, right? People have changed how they adopt this type of technology, and I believe even once we go back to the offices, we will see investments in this space, and people will demand higher quality video, higher quality experience in meeting even people whom they maybe met in the past physically. So I still see a high growth, and we have already tremendous growth there, but still continued high growth in the unified communication space.
Thank you. And from the audience, more of a comment than a question, but talking about the continual shortages in solid state drives and products, even some hard drive products, as we go forward into the June, July timeframe. There are indeed problems in the pipelines. So maybe in terms of opportunities, if I can turn to Jesper at Exclusive and just ask, what are you seeing as opportunities for Exclusive?
Well, I think, again, being so cybersecurity focused, there's a lot of opportunity there. There's still a lot more vendor fragmentation in cybersecurity than you have in other, in other pieces of the technology stack. We see opportunities in adjacencies around DevOps. DevOps and cloud native deployments has massive impact on customers' security infrastructure and security policies. So those, if I'm not allowed to talk about security, that would probably be the area I would mention.
Alex, how about you?
Well, I think there might be an interesting area out of the next gen EU investments, not so much in digital transformation, which will be obviously addressed by the traditional value business, but I'm thinking also of the green world. So I see opportunities for the smart cities and hence edge IoT stuff like that. And on top of that, in consumer segments, probably green mobility is something where we might find opportunities. There's a huge opportunity in car recharging networks and in e-bikes and all that kind of stuff. So that's another area we might be willing to explore.
Okay, I'm right there with you on the smart building, one of the projects that's close to my heart. And maybe Klaus, in opportunities regarding, Infinigate, what are you looking at?
Yeah, that's what I said already. I mean, it's mainly around technologies which are important for the digitalization and for the move into the cloud. And that means authentication is going to be a big trend, and it's going to be mainstream at some point in time. But also services around that, like managed detection and response, is growing very fast, because you need to more or less automate the monitoring of what is happening within your network, within your cybersecurity area, and that will also go mainstream. A lot of companies which actually have not invested yet, they're forced to invest into those areas. And then at the end, when something happens, you need to have an incident response, and that is also a big area of growth. And you've been seeing, how many incidents have been happening over the last couple of quarters. It's just amazing how much attacks have been occurring, and the FireEye breach, which was actually originally a breach through SolarWinds, that was probably the biggest one, and it's probably not even over, and the remediation is still ongoing. So this services around that stuff is going to be also a very huge growth area.
This is what happens when you ask hackers to work from home.
Yeah.
They have a lot more time to play on it. And that we talked at the last event, we talked about the shift to hybrid cloud. Do you think that shift is actually going in the same rate or the same speed, or you think something has changed on that? I'll start with you, Klaus, because I'm on my screen here.
Yeah, I mean, we have actually been looking into those statistics, how much was actually predicted 3 years ago in terms of move into the public cloud or into the hybrid cloud. It goes a bit slower than it was anticipated, but the move is clearly visible. So there's a lot of companies that actually move their IT environment into the cloud. It's certainly happening, but also an inhibitor is actually the security of the process, because it's a highly complex process to move all your stuff into the cloud or into the hybrid cloud. And I think that's inhibiting the speed also, because a lot of companies worry about moving things into the cloud and not being secure anymore. So it's a process which is happening. It's not as quickly as people anticipated 3-4 years ago, but it's certainly a trend which will again accelerate over the next couple of years, and companies will move definitely into the cloud.
Jesper, do you have any thoughts about hybrid cloud?
No, I think I agree with Klaus' view. I think, first of all, I think the move have been accelerated by COVID. I think COVID have accelerated a lot of trends that were already ongoing, but it happened in a matter of weeks and months rather than decades. Whether that's remote working or whether that's the shift to hybrid cloud or digital transformation for that sake. So yeah, I think we'll see that continuing. There are also companies repatriating away from the cloud. Depends on workloads and what you're trying to achieve and solve for. I mean, I think the good news, if you're focused on cybersecurity, is that cloud means data in motion. It means data in different locations, and it does again give, it drives an impact to the way you choose to secure your organization, depending on from where in the world you access your cloud, your workloads on-prem, off-prem, etc. So, but yeah, I think the move to cloud is real. I think it's happening, and I think we as a channel need to continue to think about, how do we add value and the right support around that business.
We're coming down to the end. I'd like to mention that one thing, which I haven't heard a lot about, but I'm assuming it's tied up with the edge computing, is IoT, Internet of Things. I would assume that there's increased interest. I think Alex mentioned smart city. There's definitely a lot of IoT related to smart city and smart building. For the last minute,
I actually can't hear you.
Lost you, Bob.
Oh, we lost you.
Sorry,
Bob.
it's that stray mouse that mutes. Normally, it's just the wife that's muting me. But all right, I wanted to go back and ask everyone in the panel regarding the last question. You know, where do you think the overall channel growth will be in Q2? In 2021. You know, what will the overall channel growth be in Q2? The majority seem to be saying 5 to 10%. So maybe I can start with Alex.
Well, I think we're all forgetting that at least in Southern Europe, April and May, we basically came to a complete freeze. So I think we'll have a very good comparison year on year. So I'm more positive on the growth rate. On the absolute values, I'm less positive, but definitely on the percentages, simply because it was so horrible last year. I think it will be a good quarter.
Jacek?
Yeah, I think it's something between 5 and 10%, as you predict. I mean, it's enough to look at the backlog. We have to see that we maybe could achieve more depending on availability.
Okay, Klaus?
Yeah, since we are in such a niche market, which is currently really hot, you know, I obviously see higher growth, double digit for sure. But I would assume that in general, you know, the technology sector is actually developing strongly in general. When you look at accessories and notebooks, etc., I would say the overall channel growth has to be somewhere between 5 and 10%. But I can really judge, you know, since I'm just seeing this niche of cybersecurity, which is more or less exploding right now.
Okay, and Jesper?
Yeah, no, I would be aligned with that last view. I think, you know, I would think there's going to be some challenging compares on notebooks and webcams and things that were in high demand at the, you know, at the end of March and the beginning of April and May. So I think since that's, as we saw in the beginning, is such a massive part of the channel business, that you know, 5-10 is probably not a bad number.
Well, there we have it. The Q2 proposed channel growth in the range of 5 to 10. And it seems to me that we're very fortunate to be in an industry which actually has an advantage for a change. In some of the other recessions, we haven't been so lucky, but this one, it seems to me that we're in a better position. I'm out of time here. I would like to thank my panel for, you know, joining in and just sharing their thoughts. And I think it helps everybody to re-examine their own positions on this. And I'd like to turn it back over to the GTDC folks.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank you, Bob, for hosting the panel, and the panel, of course, for being there. And Adam, of course, for your interesting views again on the current quarter and the next quarter we're heading into. Well, and if I'm hearing you, we're all hopeful, and I propose let's also stay hopeful for the rest of the year. Things are looking brighter. We're not there yet, but hopefully our next call, which will most likely be in May, we have hopefully be an even better message than this one, and we're all out of this. And then the next one, hopefully we can see you again in real life. So, well, thanks again. Wish you all a good weekend, because we're always there, and speak to you soon. See you soon again. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye,
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bob.
Cheers.